Welcome to Middle Fingers Up, the show where we hold our heads high and our middle fingers higher. I'm your host, Kieran McKay. Today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Hockey Night in Canada Punjabi's Harpreet Pandher. So welcome. I'm so happy to have you. Hi.
Hi, Kieran. How are you? Thanks for having me. How are you?
I am so good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Can't complain. The weather is beautiful out. Had a couple coffees and I'm ready for a chat.
Yeah, I'm out in Calgary, you're out in the US, so I'm really glad we have technology on our side and we were able to do this today. So, right. And a big kudos to us because you and I both aren't very good with technology and we figured it out. We were having a hard time connecting a few minutes ago. So
that's right. Yeah. I think we know how to do a Microsoft Teams invite now.
I think we figured it out now, and I think we can put IT on our resumes now. So IT support. Right there.
It's like the Punjabi saying, they go 1 + 1 = 11. you have the manpower of 11 people when you put one and one together.
Yeah, exactly. Right. When two full brains are at it, it's amazing what we could do. Let alone when you just have one. I love it. Well, I just want to take a moment and pause just to reflect and also celebrate the work put forth to get Hockey Night in Canada Punjabi where it is today. And I just think it's important to just start there because I myself don't know the details, how and what it took to get that program up and running. But as a fellow child of immigrants, I can say I understand and know that our community, has to create this space ourselves to be part of the Canadian culture. And so this whole high-def studio and Jim Hewson, which was, by the way, my favorite broadcaster growing up, and Ron McLean level respect just didn't happen overnight for all you guys. I mean, your panel has grown, your team has grown. There's like 6, 7, 8, maybe 8 of you now doing what you're doing with the NHL. And I just want to give you guys some props, all of you, because what you're doing has, I think, impacted our community, let alone so many other communities in a positive way. We're not always in the media, especially out in BC, in the best light, and to have influencers like yourself out there doing what you're doing is amazing. So I'm so excited to talk about that because there's so many different things that you guys are doing. And I think one of the important things is bringing generations of families together. So grandparents and parents and kids, I think is phenomenal. So what do you think about all of this? Like, do you sit there and reflect on, holy crap, look at what we're doing?
Yeah, I definitely do reflect on this. And going back to just the start of Hockey Night in Punjabi, it was 2008 or 2009. It was a pilot project where CBC wanted to do Hockey Night broadcasted in various different languages. So Punjabi was one of them. I believe there was Italian, Mandarin, and maybe 1 or 2 other ones in there. And they gave it a go, and the Punjabi one got a good following going and a lot of support that they continued with it. And there was a time where they didn't continue. They discontinued it, and the Punjabis, like they are, they spoke up about it, and they're like, no, we want this.
Yeah.
And so fast forward from 2008-9 to now, and it's still going. So, there's guys like Harnarayan Singh who was there from day one.
Yeah.
There's Parminder. There was a few other Parminder Singh. There was Amrinder Singh. I keep in touch with Amrinder. He's back out east. So these guys continued. It started off in Toronto where Harnarayan, he's got a book called One Game at a Time, and he talks about his sacrifice, how he used to fly from Calgary and to Toronto every weekend on a red eye.
Yeah.
And sometimes he wouldn't rent a hotel and sleep at the airports. Yes.
Yeah.
And he didn't tell the guys at CBC he was doing this. So I don't want to wreck the book. So check out that book. So there's a shout out, Ryan.
Yeah.
So I just want to mention those guys from the beginning because they helped get this off the ground. And, it switched over to Calgary somewhere in the early mid-2000s before it came over to Omni in Vancouver. So there was Bola Jahan. I think its name was Inderpreet. That's what his name was.
Nice. Okay.
And so these guys, I've had the opportunity to meet him too. So those guys held the fort when it was in Calgary with Harnarayan Singh. And in 2014, it was announced that Rogers signed this big 12-year deal with the NHL rights in Canada. So with Omni Television being a Rogers company or a Rogers brand, it was kind of a no-brainer at the time, but there was a lot of loopholes. So that was when the producer Bhupinder Handal at the time, a good friend of mine, Nathan Sikon, they were the masterminds of bringing this Hockey Night in Canada Punjabi to Omni. And Omni had a Sportsnet studio, which is where we're still broadcasting out of today on 180 West 2nd. So they went through a lot of work, but they laid out the groundwork, and here we are, ninth season just from Vancouver at the Omni studio. So there's a lot of people to mention, and if I've left out your name, my apologies. But there's a lot of people that put work into this, and Joel Darling is the guy in Toronto, the head guy. He's been a producer, executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada, and he's the big supporter and the guy we report to now. So thanks to Joel.
I love it. I also love the fact that you are saying, if I'm forgetting a name, I apologize. That means there was a lot of our community that got to be part of this historical moment in time for all of us, and it's continuing. Like you said, it took a pause, but it was clear that there was so much space available for commentating in the way that we can in all different languages. Why can't we share the joy of something like hockey? We're all in our living rooms and do it in a way where we're understanding it and playing a part. And I always appreciate the Vancouver Canucks in particular, I find, do a phenomenal job in supporting a lot of cultures. I mean, we just had the Wally last year, and that was so well done with the jerseys, and they're always trying to find a way to find support. So there's a lot of, what I'm trying to say is, like, there's a lot of visible minorities that support the Canucks. And they've been doing it for years and years. All the folks that had immigrated, let alone for the Maple Leafs and Toronto, Montreal, Canucks, Vancouver, these are major provinces and areas that a lot of our community immigrated to. If my grandfather were still here, I think he would be so proud to be part of something that has blown up in the way. And all of you sitting at that table are doing more than just commentating a game in Punjabi. You are connecting people on so many different levels. I'm curious for you, like, you're coming up to 10 years. What are some highlights? If we were to watch on Sportsnet for a top 10 highlight and we put your little clips on top 10 highlights in the last few years, what sort of things stand out for you that you want to celebrate and take a moment to recognize?
There's a lot of good moments. I reflect back, there's stuff that pops up on your timeline for pictures or whatever you posted on Facebook or Instagram. So you look back and time's just flying. Number one that sticks out is probably a viral goal call of Harnarayan Singh back in 2016. That pretty much put us on... that one? Yes, the infamous call. Like, if you didn't know about Hockey Night in Canada Punjabi, you knew it after that.
Yes.
Because that was like the mainstream one where... I still remember when we made the playoffs that year, we had one other Benino call, and we were on social media, and we all had access to our Hockey Night Twitter account. And we joke about it now. Like, when we had it, those were the infant days, we call them, at Hockey Night Canada Punjabi on Omni, right? Because it was our first or second year.
Yeah.
We used to get maybe 2 or 3 likes on each post and whatever.
Yes.
And these goal call viral ones just started blowing up. So remember, Sandeep Janda was there, Harnarayan was there, maybe Bhupinder. We sat there and we just watched it kind of blow up,
Wow.
Like, oh my God, it's at 1,000 now. Oh my God, it's at 2,000. So it was pretty much for all of us, it was the first time experiencing something go viral.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the momentum continued throughout that spring. And by the time the Penguins punched their ticket through with that Benino call, it led us to having an invite from the Pittsburgh Penguins to go down there and celebrate their cup win.
And were you ever celebrated, hey?
Yeah, and we didn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
We didn't even know if we're going to go. They invited us, so it was like, hey, we got 2 days to get to Pittsburgh for this parade. Are we going? And a couple of us were on the fence, and I remember Bhupinder was like, we have to go.
Yeah.
We have to go. So the 4 of us went down there. It was Bhupinder Handal, Randeep Janda, Harnarayan Singh, and I. So when we got down there, we connected through Chicago. Harnarayan flew from Calgary to Chicago. We met up and got the same flight from Chicago to Pittsburgh. When we get to the airport, we're waiting for the vehicle that's there, and somebody tweets out, "They're here."
Oh.
And we're like, "Oh my God, is this what it's going to be?"
Wow.
And so we're getting excited, and So we get there the night before. We stay at the hotel that's right next to PPG Paints Arena.
Okay.
And we didn't know what to expect. We're there the night before the parade. We get there, and somebody from Penn's PR goes, "Meet us at the rink at 10 a.m. inside." And we're like, "What?" And I'm already thinking, like, during parade day, I'm like, I don't think much media goes there. I go, I don't think they're even invited. It's just like an intimate thing where they have their own PR and they cover it and they release it. So, and that's what happens. We get there. We're the only media there. Everyone else is just Pens, maybe some family members and whatnot. And their main PR guy, Tom, he sets it up. He goes, "You guys are going to go into the dressing room and surprise these guys." So they're all getting dressed for their team picture with the cup on the ice.
Oh, my God.
And Harnarayan leads the way, and then he just, you've seen the video, goes, "Bonino, Bonino, Bonino, Bonino," and they all just start roaring. And they got, in the middle of the dressing room, they got the Stanley Cup, they got the Prince of Wales trophy, and the Conn Smythe. And these things are just huge. And then it's just us in there.
Yeah.
There's nobody else besides the players and their trainers and maybe their coaches. So later we get on the ice with them after they've done their pictures. We get a picture with Bonino. We got a picture with Crosby. These guys are all like super nice. And the day just continued, right? After that, we get into this little parade. I don't know what you call it, but it's a little trolley that we get in.
Yeah.
And, we're in the parade now.
Yeah.
And then we get to the end where the stage is, and we get to go on the stage. Harnarayan, does a short speech and the Bonino call, and the crowd's roaring.
Yeah.
And, the day continued with this special lunch that they had post parade in the rink. And once again, it was only the Pens. It was the Pens, from top to bottom, from their president to anyone who works for the Penguins organization and their families. And us, the Hockey Night in Canada Punjabi guys. So we're like, what the heck are we doing here?
Did you guys ask each other that? Did you look around and say, like, what is... It must have felt surreal, I would imagine.
100%. It was our lunch that we had after that. We were sitting beside Lemieux, the GM at the time, Jim Rutherford, the assistant GM, Bill Guerin, and we got one picture before in the arena. That was when Lemieux was in a suit, but now he's in a relaxed golf T-shirt and everyone's in a relaxed. So these guys are sitting there, my crew and I, and I'm like, I'm going to go get a picture. And they're like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "Hey, there's nothing to be nervous about." I go, then the rest of the guys go. We'd already gotten a picture with the cup downstairs on the golf cart with Phil, the cup keeper.
Oh, my God.
And then there's another lineup for the cup where all the families were taking it. And then I'm like, "Hey, should we line up?" And they're like, no. It's too much. The guys were just too humble. Like, both okay.
Yeah, right. So, I love that humbleness. And even when you speak about it, I read an article, you were interviewed about it, and you guys really are humble. Like any video that I've seen online and any social media presence any of you have, any interviews, that's exactly it. And again, it just goes back to being really good role models for our community. I love that you had that opportunity. It was very well deserved. My mother fell in love with all of you after that. That's sort of when she was like, "Oh, this is going to be something." Because like you said, the commentating sort of fell off the wagon, then you guys were getting back. And as you know, my father has always been a very big fan of the Canucks, let alone, having the Punjabi edition with the commentating and all that. And so just a lot of conversations I've heard about you and your crew, but never myself since I've been living out in Calgary. I know I'm still a Canucks fan. But since I've been living out here, I feel disconnected more with the hockey life. I didn't really get it in the same way as I did growing up. But knowing that you guys were out there all these years and now getting to, again, sit down with you and hear the story come right from your mouth, it's just amazing. And I think that's a great story when we talk about reflection. Like that story is about possibilities and opportunities. And that's all you guys have really been doing, is bringing possibilities and opportunities to the table.
And timing, luck, everything worked on our side that year, Karen, because what happened was that year there was no Canadian teams that made the playoffs.
Yeah.
Right?
Good
and
point.
So, Sportsnet, they gave us a lot of coverage. The local media here, we were on all the major radio stations. CKNW invited us. TSN, which is a direct competitor of Sportsnet, they invited us on to a talk show at the time, which was Blake Price and Matt Sakaris. They brought us on. So it was we were just flabbergasted by what was going on. Front page of the province newspaper, all because of a viral goal call in Punjabi.
So what would, I would imagine sports was part of your life growing up? Like, did you play a lot of sports growing up?
Yeah, I did. Soccer was the main game. I always joke around with my parents. I'm like, "Tusi mainu hockey nahi paya." Like, why didn't you guys put me in hockey? So whatever reason it was, maybe it was a cost, maybe it was getting
Yeah.
up at 5 a.m. But
Yeah.
hockey night in Canada was a staple on Saturday nights,
Yeah.
right? No, it was always there. There was always the Leafs playing at 4 o'clock local Pacific Standard Time. If you wanted to watch the Canadians, you turn on Channel 7, which was the French CBC. So we grew up loving hockey, just like your typical kid growing up in
Yeah.
Canada. Lo and behold, I never thought at the time that it was going to be broadcasted in Punjabi. So we grew up as hockey fans in our household here, and
So what would you
yeah.
go back and tell little Harp? The kid growing up playing sports, watching hockey on TV. What would you go back and tell him now that you are that Punjabi commentator on TV that another little Harp is watching right now? What would you go back and tell yourself?
It's just you never know. You never know. Whatever you think could come true, right? Playing video games and commentating, pretending to be a broadcaster. I think deep down, everyone kind of broadcasts themselves too at one point or another, right? And my brother probably remembers that, playing video games. And I think Bhupinder has a story how he even did it in Punjabi one time, playing his video games, right?
Oh, wow.
Harnarayan saying always dreamed of being a broadcaster. There's pictures in his book of him being in front of the mic and doing NHL awards.
Right.
So
just like me growing up holding, little awards as if I won an Oscar or Grammy or something. I mean, it's so far from my world, but we dream, right? As kids, we have all of this space to dream and the things that we want to grow up. I mean, I'm sure wrestling was probably a big part of your life. That was a big part of every Punjabi kid's WWF, right?
Yeah, definitely. Wrestling. I grew up watching wrestling. I remember going to rent the video of WrestleMania 3 because it was on closed circuit. And
Who was on the cover?
It was Hogan and Andre the Giant.
Yeah.
Arguably the biggest match ever to happen in wrestling. And I remember watching that on VHS. I remember my 6th birthday.
Yeah.
They used to show a recap on Saturdays of what happened, and my cousins and I were having our birthday, and it's a double birthday because my brother and I are 1 day apart in dates.
Yeah.
1 year and 4 years apart. So we always had our birthdays the same, celebrated the same day. One chocolate cake, one vanilla cake. and I remember what we were watching that day. I have those pictures. We don't have a picture of the TV, but we were watching just Andre the Giant on Piper's Pit ripping off his turtleneck that's plastic and his cross gold chain that came off. Like, I never forgot that moment watching it as a kid. As a 6-year-old, like, these guys are friends. And then, the commentator's like, oh my God, why is he doing this? They're friends. And yeah, at that time, wrestling was still real.
Yeah, 100%, right? It was for sure. Yeah. I can relate. Like I said, not knowing you, but I think a lot of similarities growing up in terms of what was blaring on that TV and sort of, trying to find our own way around the Canadian culture, right? Like, I have conversations with my husband and friends about, yes, I grew up in Canada, but my household was India, right? Like, we spoke and we ate and we talked in very different ways. And so what I would know now with pop culture, maybe I wouldn't have known then. And so these sorts of things, highlights sort of stick out with wrestling and sports and hockey. I remember my dad even, like, I grew up where my dad would always say, I'm just going to say sort of about mental health a little bit. Like, I talk a lot on the show about I'm a first generation, you are too, right? So
yes.
Growing up here, our parents only know what they know. They do the best they can. And I'm very, very grateful for what they did do for us. And I always remember mental health was never talked about. But my dad, like, I always think back, it wasn't necessarily talked about, but it was felt when he immigrated and they had 3 channels on TV and hockey was one of them. And a bunch of the boys, growing up in Richmond, BC on Moresby Drive, they'd all sort of get together and play hockey outside. And when I wouldn't have known this then, but when I look back and I think of my father, I think, oh, that was a really healthy boys club there where they maybe didn't talk about the things that we want to talk about, but they had a ritual, and that ritual meant a lot. They'd go play hockey. My dad almost missed my sister's birth because he was playing hockey and no one could find him. And so it was such a big part of our life growing up. And even with my grandfather, when he passed away, we all decided to wear the Canucks jerseys to his funeral. And so there's generations with it growing up in your home. And I think like you said a few minutes ago, it was one of the inspirational parts of seeing you guys up there was you even said, I never even played it because it was expensive. So it was a privilege, like hockey was always a privilege. And I think when I was doing a little bit of my research on you, I found some feedback like online. I think you guys have, as I've been saying, paving ways for our community in terms of playing hockey or being open to sports. I think when we put kids in sports, we're channeling positive mental health in the best way we can, if we can afford them. So my question, it's long-winded. You'll know that I'll talk for 10 minutes and then ask my question. My question for you was, how would you describe your work as growing the sports of hockey in the last few years? What are some things that you and your panel and you guys are hoping for or working on? Because you're getting a lot of feedback from community. Community loves you guys. So what are some things that you guys are doing to give back?
We just try to be involved in the community. There's lots of local stuff that goes on. For instance, my colleagues Gurpreet Singh and Randeep Janda, they were invited to a high school just to talk to the kids.
Yeah.
Making ourselves available.
Yes. Whatever
it may be. There was a local sports award. It was called Amateur Sports Award, and it was primarily just Punjabis in sports in our local community here in the Greater Vancouver. So kids and young adults were recognized for what they were doing.
Yeah.
And amateur sports, you don't go in there for the money, right? You go in there, and so these players got to be recognized and they got to be supported, and we got to show the younger guys like, hey, look, they're on a stage getting a trophy for their hard work, and somebody can be inspired. Jasmine Mander, who was assistant coach with the girls who won the Olympic gold for women's soccer, she made a speech, and she was just mentioned the importance of playing sports. Like there's some sort of statistic done on CEOs and whatnot and what they're doing, and people, at high levels or leaders, they're involved in sports ongoing. Yeah. There's another gentleman, I forget his name or who he's from, but he gave this statistic of how the kids that are involved in sports, whatever number in that's how many kids they're saving from the ER, the emerge.
Yeah.
And so it's important. And we got our kids and everything. And sometimes we complain about, there's no day off. We got to drive them here, drive them there. But you know what? These guys want to do it. If they want to do it, even if they don't want to do it, we're going to make you do it.
Yeah. Right? It's one of those hate me now, love me later kind of parenting rules.
Hey, you don't like your 4:00 gymnastics? Okay, it's going to be something else.
Yes.
Right? That time's got to be filled up with something.
That's right. Yeah.
We got out of it okay with just playing one sport. Yeah. Right? I remember just being in soccer. And then later on, elementary, joining every sport that was available. Yeah. Whether it was volleyball, basketball, cosm hockey.
Right.
I played a lot of ball hockey from the early age of 20 to. I'm still playing, but I'm focusing more on ice hockey. I got into ice hocky late, which
there you go. Really did your parents finally put you in hockey?
They didn't put me in. I had to pay with my own money.
No. Joys of growing up, hey?
they joke about it now. I was like, Mom, Dad, I'm like, all I got on you guys is that you never put me in hockey.
Yeah.
They're like, go get me to hockey. They want you come on TV for hockey. So
that's right. Look at how we raised you. But can we go back to your parents for a second? They may not have put you in hockey, but you grew up on a farm, right?
I wouldn't say grew up because we didn't get the farm until 2005. So I was already, early adult.
Yeah, you were already grown up. There was yeah. Okay, but, because I've been on that farm. Yeah. My brother got married on your parents' farm, actually.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So I've just thought, maybe, but the grandkids must spend some time on the farm then, hey?
Yes. So with the farm, we have the U-pick operation for blueberries. We don't know how long we're going to do it because it's more of a headache sometimes, but. We have our little tiffs between each other, but the summers are spent with each other.
Yeah.
And that's the way I look at it. I take time off from everything else and try to limit my work elsewhere and just try to spend time at the farm and help out my folks.
Yeah.
It's just like, that's time you never get again.
That's right.
Right?
That's
it's
right.
Like, great.
Yep.
The weather is great. The kids are on
Yeah.
their summer holidays. So
Yeah.
it's a blessing in that sense that the 3 generations get to spend in time.
Right.
COVID was another blessing. I think COVID, some good things that came out of it was, we had to socially distance, so we were just at the farm with the kids.
Right.
And I think their bond grew with their grandparents even more during that time.
Yeah. That's a really nice way of looking at it. There's always that silver lining in such a terrible time of the 3 years of COVID. And I hear that from a lot of people, that we did get to dial some noise level down and sort of figure out, where what do I want for myself, do a little bit of reflection, but also spend that time with loved ones. And I think that's a great example of that. Okay, I'm going to ask you.
Did I even answer your question? I can't even remember the question.
Oh my God, Harp, this happens every time. Am I going to edit this out? Because people know this happens every time I ask a question, then I ask 10 in between. Which question was it?
We're not editing, by the way.
I have to edit this part.
I'm going to make this so easy for your husband that he's not going to have to edit much.
The feedback we get about the show, too, is that people feel like they're in the room with us, talking to us. So I'm okay with that as well. But I do, because I cut you off and asked you about the farm. That's what happened.
I think it's good. I was just joking around. I didn't even want it to cut. I was just like, good answer your question.
Now you got me all frazzled. I'm like, where do I go back? Is there anything you want to go back and say? Because I talked about your highlight reel, and you shared one really big highlight there. Are there any other highlights you want to go back and share?
Yeah, there's definitely got to be more highlights than that. But it's just, if there's a number one, that's why I always touch on the Benino one. Other than that, it's just been going out in the community and meeting people. Those have always been highlights. Yeah. People just giving us their appreciation for what we do. It's very humbling. It's not like we ask for it or want to do it. One thing our crew and I, we joke around about is when people try to introduce us, it's like we're at the reception party and the guy goes, hey, come over here. You know who this guy is? And I'm just like, oh.
No, I don't want to do this.
Just introduce me as your friend or your cousin or whatever. I don't need that extra, thing about that I'm a part of this or whatnot.
Right.
But it's definitely cool. It's always interesting meeting folks that don't even understand Punjabi. They're like, hey, yeah, I saw you on TV the other night. We always get a kick out of that. But just being able to go to various different games. Yeah. Having a privilege of a media broadcaster pass that allows you to go into any rink at any time. Yeah. Just going to games with my kids.
I bet.
We always have, my kid, Kabir, he's in kindergarten, and I think he's been to more games in the last year and a half, 2 years than I was in my
That's insane.
Teenage to early adult life, right?
I really hope that I guess all of us moving forward, we take a moment to remind our children of that it's not always been this way. Sometimes we grow up and our generation too, we think, oh, things are just the way they are. The internet wasn't always here, or the privilege of being part of such a big hockey corporation and with NHL, it didn't just happen. And so your kids are going to grow up thinking it's so normal, right? To have the Punjabi voice out there. And I think it's for me in my household, I show my kids your guys' videos. My kids think you guys rap pretty much. They're like, these guys are like, it's like they're rapping in Punjabi. I'm like, yeah, that's right. They really are. But my point is, when I show them the videos and stuff, is helping them understand that people worked to get to where they are. Our community found something and went with it, and look at where it is now. And I always think it's important to just remind our kids, or even your son and your kids, about you were part of paving the way of having our voice out there with broadcasting.
Yeah, I'm just a small part of it. There's a big crew. Raja Shergill is our producer now. Nathan left for a good opportunity at Global. So, Raja's a guy young guy, he's still, mid to late 20s, and now he's producing. And he started out as an assistant to the producer. So there's a couple new young guys working for us. There's Tejpal Garcha. He's, I think, a BCIT grad. Same with Jagraj Lally. And these guys are doing stuff with social media or cutting clips and whatnot. So there's lots of opportunities. Yeah. And Jagraj mentions it, he used to watch our show and he was a fan of the show. Yeah. Amrit Gill, she's been with us doing our social media. That's and she awesome. Does the profile. She was also a fan, and she dates back to the Harnarayan days pre-Omni.
That's lovely.
How she was a fan and she came on the show. So a lot of our crew has had a lot of opportunity come out of Hockey Night in Punjabi. moving on to mainstream media. Harnarayan Singh, as we know, he got his opportunity, his big dream, which was always to do Hockey Night in Canada in English. Before there's even Punjabi, he was dreaming of doing it in English, right? So he's one of the main guys there. You can hear him every Saturday night. Randeep Janda, I'm very proud of him too. He started out with me 9 years ago on Omni. He was working at Omni doing assistant news editor, or I forget his title there. Today, he's still with us on Hockey Night in Canada Punjabi Saturdays, but he's doing the color commentary on the Canucks radio. Prior to that, he was 4 years on Sportsnet with his own regular weekday show. So, a lot of doors have opened, and I've seen my colleagues work hard and get to where they are. They've been persistent with it. I
love it.
And
it's inspiration.
Yes, and Amrit, she is I'd like to call her the first lady of Hockey Night Canada Punjabi, because she is.
Let's applaud that.
I get that term from wrestling. The first lady of wrestling was Elizabeth, right? She was a valet and maybe the wife, and I don't know if it was kayfabe or a real story. I think they were married, for Macho Man Randy Savage.
Oh my gosh, so, I'm just having a bit of a, oh my God, I wouldn't remember any of this, but now that you're bringing it back, it's deep. It's back there for sure.
There was no lady, and that's why they called her the first lady. So Amrit, she's integral part of
shout out to her,
us getting to where we are too. Because if that Benino call doesn't go viral, it was her on social media that was running.
Her. Oh my goodness,
that's right. And
kudos,
today
lady.
she's still with Sportsnet. She does her profile still, but other than that, she works for Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. She's got a gig there, so she's doing great over there.
That's
so
awesome.
I'm very, very proud of all our colleagues. They work hard. Every Saturday we roll in, we know we're going to eat together, we're going to have a good laugh, we're going to have some coffee, and we get to watch some games.
Do you guys order a meal in?
Yeah, we get catered food.
Oh, look at that. And, hey, you guys sit together.
Yeah, and I always joke around, there's a young guy named Tejbal, he's cutting the clips on his computer. So they set up the meal in the corner. So every time the doors open, he sees me coming, because I eat during the intermission. And my line always to him, and I repeat it every time, I'm like, what did we do to deserve this? And it's just a running joke, right? And I still
man, you get it. That's just a good reminder. You get it. You get that you are doing something big here, and enjoy it. I really think you should. I'm going to ask you, what's your favorite name to say?
I was just talking about the free meal. I wasn't even talking about the hockey name. I was talking about the free meal.
You know what? Yeah, that makes more sense, right? Getting the free. I should have just known. Yeah, what do we do to what do we deserve? Anytime you're fed, I guess. Hey, how lucky you are to be fed. What is your favorite name to say when you're talking hockey? What's your Benino?
I like to say we always get a kick out of saying Sebastian Aho.
Aho.
Because in Punjabi, Aho, right? So we kind of go nuts on the goal call there. And the funny part is there's another guy on the Islanders. His name's also Sebastian Aho.
Oh, wow.
So we haven't had time, but I heard about a game where they got into a bit of a shoving match.
Oh.
Right? And I was like, hey, we should cut that and just kind of have fun with it.
Yes.
So we still got to do something on that one. But Aho v. Aho, just kind of funny stuff.
I love it.
Or any last name that kind of has something to do with,
Yeah.
I can't think of anything on the top of my head, but Aho's a good one.
Yeah.
Benino will always be a great one too.
That one always will be, right? Yeah. What about growing up? What's a name that, is retired now, but what's a name that you wish you could say?
Zarli Zalapski.
Zarli Zalapski.
That's right. I think he was a Hartford Whaler.
Oh.
I think during the tail end he played for the Flames too.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was just cool that double Z. He's got to be the last guy in alphabetical order all time.
Yeah, that's great. Z is
cool
good.
Name,
yeah. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's good. That's awesome. I'm so glad that I didn't butcher it, because I was going to think of something funny when I introduced you and give a whole like a hockey name, and I was going to say your name, and I was like, oh, I'm going to ruin it, so I'm not going to do it. I was going to have my own way of saying it, but I stopped because it would have been terrible. And then you said we can't edit any of this out, so then it would have been really bad.
Well, you can. It's never too late.
No, maybe next time when I get you back on. This is how I get my guests back, right? So, I threaten you guys and make you guys come back. So you mentioned Amrit Gill. So I appreciate you say the first lady. I also know the Canucks have 2 female leadership in-house as well. So what are your thoughts about starting to see some female presence, behind the scenes here? How are we doing with that?
I think we're doing great. One question I had is what the heck, why did it take so long?
Yeah.
But hockey seems to be kind of late on the inclusive part of it, but it is happening, right?
Yeah.
It's late, it's slow, but it's happening, right? So we got to give credit where credit's due. A lot of women involved in hockey at the upper ranks of management and whatnot. So it's great to see with the Canucks, Emily Castengay, and they have Cami Granado.
Right.
So that is great. I think Canucks have done a very good job with the inclusive aspect of it.
Yeah.
They got women. They're celebrating all the nights. Diwali night they had one Vaisakhi night too during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Just because the season went a little bit later. So they typically don't do a Vaisakhi night because it happens in mid-April, and usually the
playoffs,
the regular season is done, or the playoffs are kicking off. Prior to that, so I think they've had about 5 to 6 South Asian themed nights.
Yeah.
So it started off with the South Asian night. That game, they had Robin Bawa, who is the pioneer.
Yeah, man, I remember Robin.
Guy.
I totally remember.
Yeah.
1989 was when he started playing.
That's right.
Yeah.
And how could we forget that game where he debuted for his first debut game with the Canucks, and he broke the glass. Yes. And so Robin dropped the puck that night.
Yeah,
and,
that's amazing.
I'd like to, our team to take a little bit of credit for making that night happen.
Yeah,
we kind of pushed for it. We had Robin in the studio the year before, so it kind of put Robin back on the map too.
Yeah.
It's like, hey guys, don't forget, we have this legendary pioneer guy.
Yeah.
So that night I still remember my Mamaji Charlie, we call him Charlie Mama, or Uncle Chuck for short. Chuck was there, and we're in the press box. My parents were, or my dad didn't make it that night. My mom was there, my mama was there, and I was introducing Robin to my mama. I was like, hey Robin, I just want to introduce you to my mama Charlie. He's like, I know Charlie, we played ball hockey together.
Oh my
gosh. I was like, wow, man, small world.
Small world, yeah.
Yeah.
That just
Robin
gave me goosebumps.
That's right. They played the Oilers that night, so the ceremonial face-off was between Henrik Sedin, who's the captain. The Canucks didn't have an up-and-out guy playing at the time, but so Juju Arquette, he was playing for the Oilers, so he was there for the face-off.
Yeah.
And now the Canucks do have a Punjabi kid in their farm club.
Arshdeep Bains.
Hopefully soon he gets called up. Arshdeep Bains, yeah. So their team is in the playoffs as we speak right now.
Yeah, they are. My dad is a frequent watcher. He actually follows Arsh quite closely. And fingers crossed, Arsh actually agreed to come on after the playoffs and do an interview with me.
Nice.
So I was talking to his brother about it. And so today I was preparing as well. And I was like, man, I got to thank my dad. Like, nepotism at its best, hey? He's well known for Twitter talk, hockey talk there. And because of him, I am sitting here with you and potentially sitting with Arsh coming up soon. So I got to send my dad a middle fingers up mug or something like that, hey?
Maybe a thumbs up. You don't want to send a middle fingers up.
Well, the mug. I have little mugs now. I have little cups now. So I'll send him a little cup for his tea or something.
I want one too.
Yeah. You know what? I feel bad for anyone that doesn't come into the studio here. I'm not sending my mugs out, so I will mail you a mug. Oh my gosh, would you? If I mail you a mug, will you give me a cheers on a broadcasting night? Although you probably can't. You probably can't do that.
So social media, I'll send you some pictures of some stuff around the commentary table and whatnot. But going back to Vrinder Uncle, your father. So
I love that you just call my dad Vrinder Uncle.
Vrinder Uncle.
Finally getting the respect that he's been wanting.
Vrinder Uncle was on Twitter, and you know what? I was like, this guy knows the game, this uncle, and I followed him, and I'm watching his tweets and whatnot, and then lo and behold, I'm at the farm, and there's like my dad's buddy standing there getting ready for their annual soccer barbecue or whatever. And I see from far away, it's Vrinder Uncle with his Canucks shirt on. I'm like, man, that's the guy. And then it was just a small world. Like, I didn't know he's
I love that story.
Buddies.
Yeah. His story is he was starstruck when he saw you. So it's really cool to hear that you recognized him. And I think I've told you this too. Like, I grew up, he would move my long division homework in grade 4 and make me memorize the Canucks numbers and last names. That was my homework. I had to know. And this was like Tony Tanti was number 9. I can't remember Jeff Courtnall's number anymore. What was he?
14.
Oh, should we play this game? Okay. What up? R.I.P. Gino Ojic. What was Gino Ojic's number?
29.
Oh, look at that, hey. What about...
And he started with 66.
Did he start with 66?
Yeah, he started with 66, and I think he played a few games, and I remember an interview, they're like, hey, Gino, why'd you switch to 29? He's like, oh, well, there's this other famous guy wearing 66, so I
Aw.
decided to change numbers. R.I.P.
Wow.
Gino. He was a sweetheart. Sweetheart, passed away recently.
Yeah.
Always a treat to sit with in the press box. Knew the
Oh.
game very well.
Yeah.
And his really dear friend, Peter, we were actually planning a road trip to go to Seattle because they hadn't been to a hockey game in Seattle.
Oh.
And I kept in touch with Peter, and Gino added me to social media, and I was blown away. I was like, hey, thanks, big bro, for the
Oh my
follow. And he just
gosh.
gave me a heart back. So, and then, just not even a month after,
Yeah.
you find out this passing. So very heartbreaking.
Very heartbreaking. Yeah. I always remember during Christmas, the media was in the Canucks locker room and they're just, goofing around, and Gino comes up and he was missing his two front teeth. And so he's like, all I want for Christmas are my two front teeth. Like, I remember him singing that, and just so funny, like little things that you remember, right, growing up. And so it was really sad to hear that. I think my father was also really sad. Anyone that was a fan of him, and you didn't have to be a Canucks fan to be a fan of his. Like you said, he had quite a presence. So yeah, that was our life growing up. Was we had to know how to play the game. Not to say that I could. If I got on skates today, I probably would be terrible at it. But yeah, we were growing up.
We're gonna continue. We gotta continue with the game. I'm gonna ask you now. So we're talking about the '94 team, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so who's number 7?
Oh, that was Matt Cook. Was it number 7?
We're talking about a little bit later.
Oh, before
I can't
that.
remember
Oh,
what
okay.
Cook was.
Wait. If it wasn't Jeff Courtnall, was it Dave Babbage? Or was
No,
Dave?
Babbage was 44. You gotta think of probably the shortest player on the team.
Okay, so it was before Matt Cook. Jeff Courtnall. No.
Cliff Ronning.
Cliff Ronning. Oh, my aunt is going to be so mad at me because she was such a big fan of Cliff Ronning, and she's going to be so mad that I wouldn't know that. Oh, I'm so mad. And I can't edit this out either.
Sorry, Auntie G.
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, Deepuji.
Yeah.
There you go. Sorry, Deepuji.
Sorry, Poligi.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, okay, well, I suck at that. Those were my dad was also, I remember the riots. You know what? Talking about toxic masculinity for a second, since I'm talking to a man here. Let's just pull such a light topic up.
Okay.
I remember, like we keep going kind of back and forth here, but I remember when I was 13 and we were in the playoffs, and we obviously Game 7 we lost, and it was like a really big riot. Yes, that sucked. But before that, I remember my dad going to the bathroom. Sorry, Papa, for this, but my parents know that I always talk about them constantly. I remember him coming out of the bathroom and he was bawling. Like, my dad was crying. And I remember looking at him. And my dad used to be a bodybuilder. Like, my sister and I used to hang off of his big muscles, and he used to take us for muscle rides. He used to up and down. He was like a really built man. And he comes out and he's bawling his eyes out. And I'm like, oh my God, what the heck's going on? There's going to be a fight. What's happening? But he was so sad that the Canucks didn't win the cup. And I just always remember that moment because, again, we don't talk about it very often or not, but these glimpses of when you see a role model such as your father, any man in our community, and you see these emotions and you think, oh my goodness, okay, what's that about? Over the years, you grow, you get a little emotional, you talk more. But that was my first time that I remember seeing my dad emotional, and it was because we didn't make it to the playoffs. And so you flash forward years later, and we're talking hockey talk and all this fun talk and all that, and you wonder where do you think things about men being able to express their emotions, especially in our community, where do you think we're at with that?
I remember myself as a kid crying with the Canucks not making the playoffs but getting knocked out of the playoffs. And I just remember my chacha walking in the room, and he's asking my dad, he's like, Harpreet Pandher, and he's like, oh, edi team hockey, right? My dad watched hockey, but he wasn't emotionally invested like myself or the uncle, let's say, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay to get teary-eyed, especially being vulnerable. My partner's always like, you know what? If you get emotional, it's okay to have a moment in front of your kids, right?
Yeah.
You want to show that side, and I had that teary-eyed moment today. So Sonia tells me that she went to the school where Ajuni, my daughter, is turning 10 this July, and they were wondering, why isn't Vaisakhi being celebrated in their school when they've had all this other stuff, and they have Diwali and they have this? And I'm like, you know what? It's probably because they don't know. It's not because they don't want to do it.
Yeah.
So she said they went in yesterday and they talked to the principal and a couple other issues that my partner wanted to talk about. And they brought up the Diwali thing. Why isn't Diwali being celebrated? And the principal was super open about it. They're like, hey, that's great. Let's do that this week. And, there's announcements in the morning. They're like, Junie, how about you? Would you like to do the announcement on Vaisakhi in the morning? And, Junie obliged. She said yes. And I was just like, just very proud, right?
Yeah.
I was like, wow, my kid gets to learn about this and she wants to be courageous and do the morning announcement. So
yeah. And also,
I think
go for it. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was done.
You just want to get back to the numbers.
I was so focused on what you're going to say that I forgot what I was even ending off with.
No, I appreciate that because I think you're raising a daughter, right? You're raising a son, and I think for them to see you, even with your daughter asking, how come this isn't available, and your response, even, it's about opportunity. So it's because they don't know. So what can we do about it? And I think even that's a wonderful example of how to be vulnerable. I'm not saying, we need to constantly, be like crying or emotional, but I think in our culture, when we haven't dealt with some of our personal experiences, maybe trauma, and we see a lot of addiction, and I always worry about our community in the sense of like we're so afraid to show something that's so beautiful, like our emotion, or could be happiness, could be sadness, could be crying because we are happy, but we can show aggression and violence, and those things we can flip it, right? Like we can find a way to also share the other side of things. But when you grow up and you watch the men around you, this is why I have a soft spot. I told you this earlier. Like I really, really, I'll know that I've done really well in this show is if I can get South Asian men interested in listening, because I think if our guys can have an opportunity, and it's not just South Asian men, it's men in general. I think that's something that a lot of men can share, whatever culture you're from, is this way of being taught that you have to be tough, you have to be hard, you have to be the one that takes care of everything and everyone. And where is the guy's place to be able to show that vulnerability, or be able to say, I'm having a hard day, or you know what, I'm really emotional, teary-eyed right now watching this moment with my child. I think, what are some things that, I don't know, maybe in your own experience of growing up and as an adult, what are some things that you feel you've done to help yourself get to that place of being vulnerable and okay to be a little emotional around your child?
Yeah, growing up, I feel like I grew up just wanting to fit in always.
Yeah.
Right. And that's something I'm trying to just teach my kids, or just give them hints that it's okay to be who you are. You know, your physical appearance, your ethnicity, whatever it is, you are good. Right. And you just got to be proud of it, because I grew up and it wasn't a racial tension, but I always felt kind of different, that I was the only Yapana kid in my class, right?
You didn't experience racism, though?
I did, but it was like, I don't want to say it was like, maybe a handful of times, being called a Hindu or whatever, whatnot. And, I just say that because it wasn't what our parents went through.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It was not even close. And, there's still racism today, but it's not as open. It's probably more hidden if there is racism. So when I grew up, I used to forget I was like a Punjabi kid. I just thought I was a white guy, right? And I'd go to the washroom and be like, oh wow, like my skin color is different. But growing up, and so for whatever reason, had a great upbringing. I got caught up in the wrong crowd, and I drank at way too early of an age. And I look back at it now, like I even got suspended from school for being intoxicated.
Right.
And at that time, I really thought that, hey, this can't be a problem. I'm just the guy who got caught. Like all the other guys are doing it.
Well said.
All the other girls they're puffing on a doobie and they're drinking before the dance and whatnot. I just got caught.
Right.
So at that time, I didn't think that it was even possible that it might be an issue. But lo and behold, I hit my early 20s, and I'm doing a lot of binge drinking, and that job that I had at the grocery warehouse, I'm not showing up to. I'm not going to my college classes at Douglas College, and I'm falling behind on the homework and just saying forget it. I'll start fresh again next semester.
Yeah.
So things like that kept happening, and I struggled on and off with booze up until the age of 29 and a half. And it was I still know the date. It was September 11th of 2010. I had my last drink.
Wow.
And prior to that, I struggled trying to quit, and I'm grateful to God that I haven't been able to pick up that drink in that time. And there's a lot of things I do to to keep my sobriety. It's something I haven't really touched on anywhere on a podcast or whatnot, but you speak about it. I think addiction and mental health go hand in hand. I definitely think that my own opinion is that everyone struggles from mental health, whether it's very mild to severe. That's a different story. So I've just been grateful for good friends, good family support, because that's needed. Anything that you're struggling with, addiction or mental health, it's a we thing. It's not an I, right? Some people do it. Some people can have a drinking problem, and these old school uncle stories like and I said and boom, they've been stone cold sober 25 years since. And I wish that was my story too. But I had to go through my struggle and get the help that I need to do. Is surround yourself with a support group of some sort.
Right.
You're having a shitty day, just know that you got these handful of numbers that you can call this person at any time, and know that they're not even going to ask how you're doing. You can just say what it is, right? Or sometimes, it's not even about saying I'm having a shitty day. Just talk to somebody else and ask how they're doing.
Yeah.
Divert that thought that's going on in your head and just be like, hey, how you doing, man?
Yeah.
And you can just hear them out. So that's something I don't do enough of. It's always been a tool, but it's a tool in the toolkit, I'd like to say.
Yeah. It's there, right? When you need it, sort of thing. And you know what? I just want to start with saying thank you. I really appreciate that you shared that. I wasn't expecting it. But I am really grateful that you did, because the fact that you're talking about something that you've gone through, such as addiction, and also talking about it in a way of, I think, normalizing it in a way of it's common to be a lot of people's story, the way you talk about it. There's a lot of us out there that could probably relate to what you're saying of, it's not me, it's someone else. I don't think it's me. I don't realize it. And kudos to you for recognizing at 29 and a half, man, right before your 30th, that, okay, I got to do something here. And to not have touched a drink since, congratulations. That's amazing. That's something that I would put on my highlight reel up there. I think that's something that you can do you, but I would encourage you to talk about that more, because like I said earlier, you are an inspiration and you are an influencer, and it's a superpower to have an influence. If I could have any superpower out there, it would be to be an influence, and you have it. And to talk about it with others so that it opens doors for people to say, okay, me too, I can go get help, or I can do something about this. I think when you look at the rates of even like suicide, I think it's like estimated, they say 4,000 suicides in Canada. And that's low because people don't talk about it. People don't report it, right? So a lot of times families will cover that up. And so when you have 4,000 reported suicide deaths in Canada, this was just the stats from last year, 75% of them are men. So a lot of women are in the same boat, but they will often seek the help, often find a way to talk. And our culture over the years has prevented that, I believe, for men in many ways, where it's just not normal for you to talk, or, that's not what men do. You got to be a wrestler. You got to be macho. You got to do all those things. And I think that number, I think we can all help that number go down by just sending that message out. We can talk. It's okay to talk. I had a really crappy day yesterday, and I was so grateful for my friend who is a therapist but won't be my therapist because I'm conflict of interest. But anyways, I was talking to my friend about my bad day, and it was so... I said something that I wasn't going to say. I wasn't going to tell her I was having a bad day. But because she's my friend and she knows me well, she read into my text and she said, "How are you doing, by the way?" And, you burst into tears and you text back. And I was like, okay, that was a great door opener, because even though I'm in mental health, I do this every day. Even I was having a hard moment to want to open the door myself and say, this is what my day's like. But to have someone else open it for, it's like the analogy, right? Even when you go to the mall and some lovely person opens the door for you, how nice is it to have the door open for you just when you're walking into a store or something? But when it comes to our well-being, if somebody can open that door for us, isn't that just even better to have someone say, hey, I'm inviting you to tell me the pain that, you know, you're going through, or what is going on for you, or are you actually okay, versus, oh yeah, I'm good, I'm fine.
Yeah, it's those little things go a long way. Just making a call or asking somebody how they're doing, or just saying hello to a stranger and smiling, right? Or getting a response back. So,
Yes.
you know, going back to, you were mentioning just in our Punjabi community specifically, just with males, I think there's a component of just the shame, right?
Yeah.
Just getting over the fact that, hey man, I can't drink. Oh my God, how am I going to be perceived by others? How am I going to be judged? Or so worried about, oh, what am I going to do at my chacha's son's wedding? Oh my God, like just, you know, those thoughts that just fester of
Totally.
how is life going to be without booze, right? And I've been there. I've had that struggle of just not wanting to be different, right?
Yeah.
It's like I don't want to be like this guy that can't drink. Like I need to, and I tried hard to prove it, changing a group of friends or changing the styles and whatnot. But once I was able to accept it, that hey, you know, and I remember my grandparents even telling me, my nana, he had a drinking problem, but he quit, and he just told me, he goes, it's not for us. He goes, for you and I, it's not for us.
Aww.
And even my dad, he said it too. So at that time, nobody can really tell you, and it's not going to make any sense that, hey, you shouldn't drink, right? But I mean, really, we should be thinking like the person who's struggling is kind of the last person to figure it out that they need to quit, right? Their employer's telling them, their loved ones are telling them, they're like, hey, you need to quit, it's a problem. But for me, I was the last one to figure it out.
Well, I think sometimes it's asking ourselves too, like, at what point, how would I know if this was going to be a problem for me? I think just stopping and asking that, like, how would I know if this would be a problem? Whether it's in a relationship that's toxic, whether it's substances, whether it's a really crappy job, whatever it is, when will I know that this is going to be a problem for me? Because I think we just push that threshold. We just keep going. People just keep going. Like you said, there's all these reasons why people may believe that they're not the ones that have an addiction or that are struggling with their mental health. Like you said, we all have our mental health. It's like our physical health. It's just sometimes we need a tune-up. And I refuse to believe that there's people out there that never, ever, ever need to talk about their well-being. Like, that's just not how it works for humans. So those of us that are not talking about our well-being, my hope is that there is someone out there that cares about you, that is willing to ask you, like, what's going on in your world? What do you need? How do you know you're okay when you tell me you're okay? Right? So I think I cut you off there. Sorry.
No, you didn't. No, it's all relevant stuff. You know, I think post-pandemic, it killed the stigma a little bit more. It's just like the person who wasn't suffering from something, like, hey, you know, they're saying they're struggling with their mental health too. So all these little things that we can do go a long way. It's whether it's going for a walk, fitness, breathing, you know, there's stuff out there. There's specific programs to help with us, right? And you know, if I just tell, like, in regards to addiction, I'll be like, hey, there's X amount of programs. There's 5 or 6 different things you can do. Go try it. You're not going to know if it fits for you unless you try.
Yeah.
You know, and if it doesn't fit for you, try the different avenue that's available.
That's right.
Yeah, it's about, there's got to be a little bit of willingness there too, right? If a part of you is like 60% you want to drink and 40% wants to quit, then you know, it's probably not going to work. Yeah. It's probably going to be a struggle.
Right.
And
but it's also what you said. Like, I think the hard part to quit is exactly what you said, where alcohol in particular it's a ritual in, let's say, in our culture, if not in many cultures. So like you said, your chacha's son's reception, your whatever else event that you have, you're in the media. I'm sure you have a lot of events that come up that you have to attend. And I think it's sometimes can be hard for folks to visualize themselves outside of that alcohol, because that juice, that alcohol gives you a whole different flair, right? Like, we open up more, people feel they can let loose, they can party. So it's like, how do you get those needs met by letting loose and feeling great without drinking? It's possible, like you said, whether it's working out or what, but it's helping people also realize that sometimes people are afraid that they're going to lose their community and the people around them when they stop those things, because we always have a wedding, we always have an event. So how can I sit at that reception party and enjoy myself? And I think that's the sad part for me, is like, I don't have an answer. I know for myself what I can do. I'm sure you figure it out for yourself. Like, how have you been able to attend events year after year after year and feel like yourself, that you don't need that drink?
It's a little difficult at the beginning for sure, but I mean, I had a lot of mentors and a lot of guidance to help me along this journey of sobriety, where people said, hey, if you don't feel content or comfortable, you don't need to go.
Yeah.
Right?
Well said.
If that person on the other end and your Chacha's family that you're invited to, I'm just saying an example.
Yeah.
Chacha's son's not even married yet, and they don't even drink.
Sounds like it's going to be a great wedding, though.
They're not even going to have booze at their reception, so I don't need to worry about that one.
Right.
But just going back to it, it's, if you're not ready, don't go.
Yeah.
If that person really loves you, they'll understand that, hey, Harpreet wasn't able to make her function because he was in early sobriety.
Yeah.
You know, you're not that, Harpreet's not that big that he's got to make that wedding to show face that he's doing okay.
Yeah. Well said.
You know, and later on, you start going to these functions and you go a little bit prepared. Like, you know, for stuff like me, it was like being well nourished, you know, having your mentor know that, hey, I'm going to go to this function tonight. Maybe just call me and check up on me. Go there early. Make sure you leave early.
Yeah.
Have a drink in your hand. People are less susceptible of asking you to drink.
Right,
you know, little tips and pointers like that. So now I go into a reception and it's like, I'll eat, I'll enjoy myself, I'll be social, I'll dance, you know, all minus the risk of blacking out or making a fool out of myself. I'll get in my own car and I'll drive home and I'll drop off a couple of guys that are drunk.
Yeah, good.
You know.
Yeah.
Paying it forward for all those rides that I got home when I was hammered.
Oh, man.
You know,
yeah, all the times you puked in people's vehicles.
I managed to open the door, but as far as there's a lot of puking, but just not in cars.
Those experiences, right? Like you said, like, oh yeah, I got in my own car. I didn't embarrass myself. A lot of times it's like that anxiety when you wake up the next day, like, what happened? Like, what the fuck happened? Was I making a fool out of myself or whatever? Or the fights, right? The fights that break out because we can't manage ourselves and any substances, if we mix them or whatnot, right? All sorts of things, as we know, that happen. We've been part of, we witnessed, we've experienced. I think it's refreshing to hear you talk openly about your journey. And I hope you keep talking about that, because I think there's a lot of people out there that can use a support. And the more of us that talk about it, I think then it means the more of us are trying to break that stigma. Like our community, right? Like if you look up what a village means, you a lot of third world countries, second world countries created that whole meaning of what a village is. And in the South Asian community, that's how I grew up. Our village, our family, our resources, we have so much of it. However, when it comes to hard things about ourselves, things that are happening in our home, we don't access our village in the same way that we could. And so I think people like you, people like me, people out there that are talking about it more and more will hopefully, I think, add to the village mentality of, I have all this love and support around me that's willing to help me work through in the same way that you're talking, that you did. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the individual, right? Like we have to be willing to do it. No one can make us, no one can tell us, you know, it has to be a personal journey.
Yeah. And, you know, not everyone is kind of open about it. And I went through a phase where I just, you know, I don't want to tell people, but in a way I want people to know.
Yeah.
Right. So for example, my mom said she went to a ladies' party, and she goes, she's like, I didn't know what to say. The lady's son was struggling with a substance, and she just felt for her. And then she's like, I hope you don't mind that I gave your number or said my son can probably help your son. I was like, you know what, Mom, in that instant is totally fine.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, I just don't want, well, this is my son, Harpreet, and he's been sober this long. And
yeah.
I'm like, you just don't need to advertise it, right?
Well, that doesn't define you, right? Like that's
right.
that's a part of your story, but I'm glad that there's probably a time that it did define you, and it sounds like you've found a lot of other outlets and a lot of other, you know, definitions of who you are outside of drinking.
Yeah, and it's one of those things people are, I wouldn't say embarrassed, or a little bit shameful at the beginning. They don't want anyone to know, right?
Yeah,
and a lot of people are open about it, and so there's no right or wrong way
That's
about
right.
it, right?
That's right.
I'm pretty sure a lot of people don't want the world to know about their mental health, whether they have it in check or not, right? They just don't want people to know.
Yeah.
But for me, there's no shame, there's no judgment, and like, why would I judge when I'm in this thing myself?
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah.
I have empathy towards anyone who's struggling with something.
Yeah.
Right. And not everyone's gonna have the answer either. Like,
yeah.
a lot of people, they ask questions and I still don't know. Like, people ask me like, hey, why is it that you started drinking so much? I was like, I really don't know. Like, is it hereditary? Is it something that I experienced in my youth? And I'm like, I don't think it is. For me, for my experience, it's just like, hey, I took a drink and I just found out, I drink differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not made for me. I don't have the chemical makeup in my body to process alcohol like a normal person does.
Well,
right?
To be honest, what normal person can process it? I think some of us just hide it better than others.
There is. I've seen those people, and Karen, and I still scratch my head and I wonder, like, how did that guy just crack a beer and just drink 3/4 of it and he left it there? And I used to look, and I'm just like, man, that's real alcohol abuse right there. It's just like, even going to a hockey game, it's just like, I laugh at them, like, people are paying like $10 to $12 for that beer, and you're not even going to finish it. You're crazy. You're wasting your money. Right? That's the kind of alcoholic thinking.
Totally.
Today,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, I've heard that before. Absolutely. Like, you can't waste it. You can't, and that comes from, for some people too, of just your own upbringing in terms of, a lot of us grow up with, you can't waste food, you can't waste things. And it's for many of us because we can only afford so much or what. And then it just transfers over to terrible things such as substances, where we're like, well, we can't waste it. We got to finish all of that. I'm like that with sugar. I think the real, like I always say, sugar is crack. Like, that's the biggest addiction out there. I mean, I get alcohol is up there, and I get all the other ones that kill you up there. And because sugar doesn't necessarily, well, I guess if I'm diabetic, doesn't get processed in the same way as substances, I'm like, we got to put that up in there and do some work around it in our households, because it's such easy access and our kids have access to it constantly. And I know when I pay close attention to my children, and after Easter, I'm like, we're gonna have a little spiral. We're gonna hit a dead end here with how much sugar we had over the weekend. And I look at that and I think, that's not okay. Right? And I get, we're not comparing it. We can't compare it in the same way, I get, to substances, but I keep saying it. It's like crack, man. It's also bad. So there's addictions in so many different ways. Many of us aren't necessarily all addicted to substances. And I think your point being of, okay, just first step of recognizing, is this an issue for me? And is there something that, some way I can seek some help, or asking someone, talking to someone about that. So
yeah, those addictions, as similar as they are, there's a few differences. With the addiction of the food or phone, it's like, you can't fully be abstinent of those things. Like, you are going to need your phone, you are going to need your food, right? Yeah. So there are differences in that sense, and I also believe that you don't need to be fully abstinent from your substances either, right? I think there are some people that can work their way to this harm reduction model where they can limit their alcoholic beverages from X amount to just 3 or 4 a week. And they're okay because they've tried every avenue, right? With my experience, I did try that too, and it didn't work. So abstinence works for me. So there's no judgment. There's no thing that's saying this is the only way you can quit.
That's right. Well said. Yeah. There's lots of, your story is one of many other stories out there in terms of how things can work for folks. So I appreciate that you're saying that. You're talking about what's worked for you, but that doesn't mean that's the be all end all. And I would agree with that. Lots of different ways to, and I think that's the end game too. That's the message in all this too. Is like, there's lots of different ways to seek help, to get the help, to ask for it. But I really liked what you said earlier. It's also flipping it when we can also ask others how they are doing. And, if we're worried about them, sharing that with them. If we're thinking about them, sharing that with them as well, versus waiting, because some of us, it's hard. It's hard to talk. It's hard to ask for it. Like I said, like in my example a few minutes ago with my friend, had she not asked me and opened that door for me, I would have probably just yesterday ruminated, thought about whatever was bothering me and dealt with it on my own. And went so much better having her her help. And it was just a few things. Like it was a 10-minute conversation. That's all it was, right? And I got to choose. And I think that's the other message, like I hear you sharing too, is we each get to choose how much of our story or what we're going through we want to talk about. So sometimes we get so afraid and worried that people are going to be exposed to all of this about us, but it is up, we get to navigate, we get to direct, well, I'm going to tell you this, or, she didn't know the whole version of everything, but she knew enough to be able to help me out. And I think I hear what you're saying. Okay. So I'm kind of coming to an end here with you. I know you've given me a lot of your time. I just want to maybe ask you a couple more questions before we come to an end.
Go for it.
The last two I always ask. So I'm going to ask you if there's anything that you wish I had asked today or anything that you wanted to share today. Could be outside of what we were talking about, but in terms of mental health, we talked about hockey. We talked about a lot of things today. So anything that you wish you had shared or that you wish I had asked today?
I can't think of anything right now. Maybe it'll come back to me after you ask me the next question.
And then you'll come back and we'll do another episode together.
For sure. 100%.
If anybody was watching this, he was actually shaking his head no when he said for sure. So
I shake it that way, but I am saying yes.
You see, you're so nice. I can't even like bug you and make fun of you. You're just so kind. Very hard
maybe you can do it in the second episode.
Yeah, there we go. Perfect. So my last question is, I always get my guests to do my work for me. And so I'm going to get you to do a call to action with the listeners. So I'd like you to answer, what is something that you can leave with the listeners today? Something that you want them to think about or maybe go and do along the lines of what we've been talking about.
I think it goes back to the mental health addiction conversation of being vulnerable to just reaching out to that one person or maybe a couple people to just say, hey, you know what, I'm struggling with this, whatever it is, right? And it's A-okay. I definitely have a pretty long phone list, even though I don't access to everyone, but I just know if I was to call this person, he would help me in this spot, right? And sometimes it is those small things like a call or whatnot. I have this old mentor. He's not doing too well health-wise right now, but he used to call in the morning, and that call would be 30 seconds long. And man, I would feel better. He would feel better. Oh. Just like, hey, how you doing? This and that. Punjabi Join, this and that. And that was it. And you're going. So keeping in touch with a support group, loved ones, I think it's important because I know even today mentally, when I get jammed in, the worst thing I can do is just be in my head.
Yeah.
So instead of just, in the road, I'm driving for 20 minutes. Am I going to be just in my own head, just whatever, thinking?
Yeah.
No, it's better to just go through that list. I might have a missed call, return that call or whoever it is.
Yeah.
And you don't have to say I'm struggling.
Yeah.
Just make that call. See how the other person is doing.
Yeah.
It's a two-way thing. And I know sometimes I feel like, hey, people aren't phoning me. What's going on? Blah, blah, blah. But really, am I putting it out there? Am I making those calls?
Exactly.
So it's a two-way thing, definitely.
Well said. I really appreciate that. I like that you said that. I think you're talking about connection. Connection is important and we seek it in all sorts of ways. And the way that you talked about it right now is a healthy way, just to reach out to someone, a quick call, text, whatever it may be. And I think it can leave us feeling so much better than maybe we were 5 minutes prior to that. Well, that's very well said.
Yeah, there's a cliche about, I don't know what word for word I'm paraphrasing, but just like the opposite of addiction is connection, right? And I hold that to be true for myself because whatever's happening in my life, the good things that are going with sobriety, it's given me opportunity, right?
Yeah.
I had opportunity before, but I ruined it because of drinking. And I'll go back to hockey night. I've legit been sick twice, in 9 years.
Yeah.
If I'd been drinking, I don't think they would have had a season 2 for me, so I'm very grateful that, my life today is good because God showed me where the help was.
Yeah.
It's all around me. And yeah, I don't know how to put it into words, but
you've done a lovely job.
Yeah.
You've done a really
I don't know how to put it into words, but anyone, and I'll give this one too, is you can reach out to me on social, any listeners, if you guys need some sort of guidance. I don't have the answer, but I can probably put you in touch with the right resource if you or a loved one is struggling with something, especially addictions, because that's something I've done some work in working employment wise or with my own recovery journey myself. So I just thought I'd throw that out there.
You know, what I really appreciate is that often we ask the question of like, how can we change the conversation? And today what we've done is we've changed it by starting it. You started a lovely conversation about your own personal journey. And I think that's exactly how you start to break the stigma, is starting the conversation versus walking around it. And well done. I really appreciate that. It's a very nice message that you shared.
Karen, sorry. Yeah, I just want to mention that, you know, even if I look at the NHL teams or whatnot, there always seems to be one kind of player on every team, it seems like, that is going through something.
Yeah.
They go into the program and whatnot that the NHL does. They have their substance abuse policy or whatnot. So there's always those stories coming out, and for me, I find them like very motivating.
Yeah.
You know, just if there's a person struggling listening, like I know I'm not going to change the world by mentioning that whatever, but if it gets to that one person and it just kind of gets them thinking,
yes,
that's great, right?
Yeah.
And I love reading those success stories, and they're not all success stories by all means.
Yeah.
You know, I've been around this thing for a while where people don't make it, right?
Yeah.
It's life and death. It's not a Mickey Mouse game, right?
Totally.
So
Yeah.
that's why I urge everyone, like, you know, don't be shy, don't be shameful, right? Like, we're all in this thing together.
Yeah.
Reach out to somebody. So the NHL's done a great job, and it's just more open now, right? The stigma is being kind of stripped away.
I hope so, right? I think we can only start in our own homes, in our own conversations, and like you said, it's about something so simple but so complicated, just talking. And you sharing what you did today and talking about looking at the NHL, and when we look at heroes and role models and they let us into their vulnerability, I agree, that's another superpower of, oh my goodness, if this person that I look up to is struggling with this or went through this thing, then that means that I can get through it too, or I can find a way. Because often we put our parents and people that we look up to on this pedestal and they're perfect. And there's nothing better than hearing from people that you look up to that it's not perfect and they're struggling. It normalizes it for the rest of us as well. So and you know, the other piece too is, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, you mentioned parents, and you know, God bless my folks. They tried really hard, right? They tried to support me the best way they could. They knew I wasn't in good shape, but you know, they couldn't do anything. And I think for them, I think parents put a lot of pressure, or spouses or partners of the one who's affected, that, hey, why can't I fix this problem?
Yeah.
Right? And you know, the only person that truly understands, I believe, is a person who's going through that kind of very similar situation themselves, right? So, you know, I just want to really thank you for asking me to come on. I've never really had I guess I've had platforms, but this felt for me to be, you know, the right place to just have this conversation. So thanks for having a platform such as this.
That means a lot. I really appreciate that. Okay, thank you for that. You just got me all a little emotional now. So I'm also glad. This was a good feeling. I've had goosebumps this whole conversation. So it's been great. I was a little nervous because you're like a celebrity. And anytime I've had...
No, we're not. I mentioned that we are not. And please, for the love of God, do not introduce me at anybody's party who I am. I'm your cousin. I'm your friend. Right?
Hey, do you know this guy?
I'm that guy who's going to help you get sober. That's who I am, okay?
Yeah. Well, you know what? You have another phone number on your list, and it looks like I have another phone number on my list of people that I can call now. So I really appreciate that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Right back at you.
So for everybody else listening, if you have any feedback about today's conversation, you know where to reach me at info@mfupodcast.com or on Instagram at mfupodcast. Love the feedback. Remember, these conversations are door openers. So if there's anything about this particular topic that you were interested in or want to learn more about, just let you know where you can reach me. So I'd love to hear from you. I'm really appreciating all the feedback from folks. So thank you so much. Thank you again, Harpreet, for coming on today. Have a great day.
Thanks for having me, Karen. You too. We'll talk to you soon.
Go Canucks, go. Although we're not going to make
Abbotsford Canucks. Yeah, I'm missing the Calgary Wranglers and the Abbotsford Canucks because both those teams are going into the playoffs because their NHL big brother sister is not going.
That's okay. We kind of figured. It's all good.